What are you even doing here? You don't look like you're studying anything.
Well, I'm studying. I have a membership card and I'm allowed to sit here.
Yeah? Then why did you threaten her when, and why is she saying you're refusing to leave while trying to bully her?
Because I won't give up a public seat.
I'm telling you right now, get up before I make you.
Let go of the chair, officer. You're coming
No,
with
I'm not.
me. Stand up.
I am standing. You don't have the right to drag me out.
Officer, hey, let's slow down, please.
Ma'am, stay back.
He's a card holder. He's allowed here. We can talk about
Exactly.
this.
I haven't done anything wrong. He was reported for threatening a patron.
And we're looking into that,
Okay.
but right now let's keep our...
On an ordinary afternoon at the Old Town Branch Library in Fort Collins, a routine disagreement between two patrons should have ended with staff mediation. Instead, it triggered a personal phone call that brought police rushing to the scene, not to investigate, but to remove one specific person. Minutes later, Terrence Carter, a respected civil rights attorney, would find himself surrounded by officers, treating him like a suspect before anyone even asked what happened. By nightfall, careers would already be moving toward collapse. If you believe stories exposing abuse of authority deserve to be told, take a moment to subscribe, because what happened inside this library didn't stay hidden for long. Terrence Carter was 39 years old and had been coming to the Old Town Branch Library twice a week for nearly 3 years. Staff recognized him without needing introductions. He preferred the same seating area near the west windows, quiet, good lighting, close to legal archives he occasionally referenced between cases. Most afternoons, he was reviewing case law or reviewing notes away from his downtown office. After nearly a decade handling civil rights litigation across Colorado, the library had become his reset space, somewhere predictable. That afternoon, he was reviewing documents for an upcoming housing discrimination case when a shadow stopped beside his table. "Excuse me," the woman said sharply, "you're sitting in my spot." Terrence looked up calmly. "I'm sorry?" "That seat," she repeated, pointing directly at the chair. "I use it every day." Her name was Lynette Dempster, another regular patron known more for complaints than conversation. Library staff had mediated minor disputes involving her before, arguments over noise, computer time limits, even who sat where. Terrence glanced around. Empty tables were scattered across the reading area. "I don't see any reserved sign. It's public seating." Her expression hardened immediately. "You people always want to argue," she muttered. Terrence looked up again. "I'm not arguing, I'm just staying seated." Library Supervisor Janice Rowell approached after noticing raised voices. After checking both memberships, she confirmed policy plainly. "Ma'am, seating isn't assigned. Anyone can sit here." Lynette stared at Terrence, embarrassed but unwilling to back down. "So you're really not moving?" she asked. "No," Terrence said calmly. She grabbed her bag abruptly. "Fine, we'll handle this another way." Through the front glass doors, security cameras later captured Lynette stepping outside, pulling out her phone, and making a call that didn't go through dispatch. Inside, Terrence returned to reading, unaware that the conversation happening in the parking lot wasn't about library policy anymore. It was about removing him. And less than 5 minutes later, a Fort Collins patrol vehicle turned into the library entrance at speed. The patrol vehicle stopped abruptly near the library entrance, tires crunching against loose gravel before the engine fully settled. Inside the reading area, most patrons barely noticed at first. Libraries were quiet places. Police presence usually meant someone needed assistance or directions. But outside, Lynette Dempster was already waiting. She stepped toward the cruiser before the officer even exited, leaning down toward the open window. Security footage would later show her pointing immediately toward the building entrance while speaking quickly, visibly agitated. Moments later, the driver's door opened. Officer Brandon Seaver stepped out. Seaver had been with Fort Collins Police for 6 years. Prior internal notes, reviewed much later, described multiple citizen complaints about his confrontational tone during routine calls. None had resulted in discipline. Most were categorized as communication issues. He didn't walk toward the entrance casually, he moved with purpose. Lynette followed closely behind him as they entered the library together. Conversation across the reading floor slowly faded as the automatic doors slid open and Seaver's voice carried farther than necessary. "Where is he?" Heads turned. Without hesitation, Lynette raised her arm and pointed directly across the room. "There, that's him." Terrence Carter looked up from his papers as the officer approached, boots striking loudly against the tile floor. Seaver stopped beside the table but didn't introduce himself. "You need to stand up," he said flatly. Terrence blinked, confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I said stand up." Several patrons exchanged looks. The tension felt immediate, disproportionate to the quiet environment. Terrence closed his folder slowly. "I'd like to know what this is about." Seaver glanced briefly toward Lynette, who remained a few steps behind him with folded arms. "She says you're causing a disturbance and refusing to leave," Seaver replied. "That's not accurate," Terrence said calmly. "We disagreed over seating. Staff already resolved it." Library Supervisor Janice Rowell moved closer. "Officer, there's no disturbance," she explained carefully. "Both patrons have valid access." Seaver cut her off without looking at her. "I'm talking to him." The dismissal drew attention. Phones quietly began lifting from tables. Terrence remained seated. "Am I being asked to leave the library?" Seaver's expression tightened. "You're being told," he said, voice lowering, "to cooperate before this becomes something else." Terrence kept his tone measured. "Respectfully, I haven't violated any policy." That response seemed to irritate the officer more than refusal would have. "You people always want to debate instead of listening," Seaver muttered. The words landed heavily in the silent room. Janice frowned. "Officer, again, he hasn't done—" Seaver turned sharply toward her. "Ma'am, step back." Behind him, Lynette watched quietly, her earlier frustration replaced with visible satisfaction. Terrence noticed it, and for the first time, realization began settling in. This wasn't an investigation. The officer had already chosen a side before walking through the door. Seaver rested his hand near his duty belt. "Last warning, stand up and gather your things." Terrence looked around at the watching patrons, then back at the officer. "I'm not leaving a public library without cause." The air shifted instantly. Seaver's posture hardened. "All right," he said, "you just made this a lawful order." His hand moved toward his radio, and across the room, another patrol unit pulled into the parking lot. The second patrol vehicle hadn't fully stopped outside when Officer Brandon Seaver reached for Terrence Carter's arm. "Stand up," Seaver repeated, louder this time. "Now." Terrence slowly pushed his chair back but kept his hands visible on the table. "I'm complying," he said calmly, "but I need clarification. What lawful order am I refusing?" Seaver didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Terrence by the sleeve and pulled him away from the table hard enough to draw gasps from nearby patrons. Papers slid to the floor. A notebook struck the leg of a chair. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Seaver said. Terrence steadied himself. "Officer, you're escalating this for no reason." The front doors opened again as Officer Nolan Eric Worth entered, scanning the room before moving directly beside Seaver. "What have we got?" Worth asked. "Non-compliant subject, refusing removal." Janice Rowell stepped forward again, visibly uneasy. "That's not accurate. He hasn't threatened anyone. This was already resolved." Seaver raised a hand without even turning toward her. "Ma'am, stay out of this." Phones were fully raised now. Multiple patrons recorded openly. Terrence noticed and spoke carefully, keeping his voice even. "I am not resisting. I'm asking why I'm being removed." Seaver leaned closer, his tone dropping just enough to sound personal. "You think you can sit here arguing policy like you run the place?" Terrence frowned. "No, sir. I'm exercising my rights as a patron." Seaver laughed under his breath. "Yeah, you people always got rights ready." The comment drew visible reactions around the room. Terrence paused. What does that mean? Seaver's grip tightened. It means you're done talking. Without warning, he twisted Terrence's arm behind his back. Pain shot through Terrence's shoulder as the officer forced him forward onto the table edge. Books toppled to the floor. "I am not resisting," Terrence said loudly. "Stop resisting," Seaver shouted back, despite no struggle. Officer Worth hesitated briefly, glancing at the watching crowd before taking Terrence's other arm. Metal cuffs clicked open. "Officer," Terrence said through controlled breathing, "this interaction is unlawful." Seaver leaned closer again. "Then you can explain it downtown." The first cuff snapped shut. At that moment, Terrence spoke clearly enough for nearby phones to capture every word. "My name is Terrence Carter. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I am being detained without cause." Seaver froze for half a second. The hesitation was noticeable, but instead of backing off, his expression hardened. "Oh, so now you're a lawyer. That's supposed to scare me?" The second cuff locked into place. Across the room, Lynette Dempster watched silently, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact with anyone recording. Seaver turned toward Worth. "Charge him with disorderly conduct and refusal to comply." Terrence shook his head slowly. "This started because she wanted my seat." Seaver pulled him toward the exit. "No," the officer said coldly. "This started because you didn't know when to listen." As they dragged him past the reading tables, multiple patrons protested. One voice called out, "He didn't do anything." Seaver ignored them. Outside, sunlight hit Terrence's face as the doors opened, and for the first time, flashing patrol lights reflected across the library windows, turning a simple disagreement into a public arrest, now witnessed by dozens. The patrol car door slammed shut behind Terrence Carter, sealing off the sound of voices still spilling from the library entrance. Through the window, he could see patrons gathered near the doors, several still holding phones. Janice Rowell stood among them, speaking urgently to someone Terrence couldn't hear, as Officers Brandon Seaver and Nolan Worth walked away toward the sidewalk. Seaver wasn't rushing anymore. The urgency he showed inside the library had disappeared the moment Terrence was restrained. Inside the vehicle, Terrence adjusted slightly against the tight handcuffs. "Officer," he called through the divider, keeping his voice controlled, "I'd like to know the specific charge." No response. Seaver remained outside speaking with Lynette Dempster. She appeared calmer now, nodding while explaining something, occasionally gesturing toward the building. Worth stood nearby, typing into a tablet mounted inside the cruiser. A few minutes later, Seaver opened the rear door again. "You're being charged with disorderly conduct and failure to comply with lawful orders," he said. Terrence looked directly at him. "Based on what behavior?" Seaver shrugged slightly. "You caused a disturbance, multiple complaints." "That's false," Terrence replied. "Library staff confirmed there was no disturbance." Seaver's expression flattened. "You can argue it in court." The door shut again. At the Fort Collins Police Department intake area, the tone shifted from confrontation to procedure. Belongings were cataloged. Wallet, phone, legal folders taken from his bag. Terrence watched silently as an officer placed evidence tags on documents related to an active civil rights case he had been preparing earlier that afternoon. "This material is privileged," Terrence said. "You can't access client documents." The booking officer avoided eye contact. "Take it up with the arresting officer." Across the room, Seaver sat completing his incident report. Later investigations would show the timeline entered into that report differed significantly from library security footage. According to Seaver's written statement, Terrence had been loud, argumentative, and disruptive, refusing repeated lawful commands while alarming patrons. None of those claims matched recorded video, but at that moment, the report became the official version of events. Worth signed as supporting officer. 2 signatures turned accusation into record. Hours passed before Terrence was allowed a phone call. By evening, local booking logs listed his arrest publicly. Within hours, online police activity reports summarized the incident in a single sentence. Male subject arrested following disturbance at public facility. No context. No mention of Lynette Dempster. No mention of a Lynette Dempster. Only the arrest. And by the next morning, colleagues from Terrence's law firm began calling, confused, concerned, already seeing the report circulating online. Reputation moved faster than truth. Back at the station, Seaver submitted the finalized paperwork without hesitation. To him, the situation was already finished. But what neither officer realized was that multiple recordings from inside the library were no longer just sitting on personal phones. They were being uploaded. And before sunrise, the first video clip of the arrest began spreading beyond Fort Collins. By the following morning, the arrest of Terrence Carter was no longer a local police matter. It was online. The first video appeared just after 6 a.m., uploaded by a college student who had been studying near the West Reading section of the Old Town Branch Library. The clip was short, less than 40 seconds, but clear enough to raise immediate questions. It showed Officer Brandon Seaver approaching Terrence without introduction. No shouting, no disturbance, no threat, just commands. By mid-morning, additional angles surfaced. Different phones, different positions inside the library. Each recording captured the same progression. Lynette Dempster pointing, Seaver confronting, escalation happening almost instantly. One video clearly recorded Seaver saying, "You people always got rights ready." The phrase spread quickly. Local community pages picked it up first, then regional accounts. By noon, civil rights organizations were reposting the footage alongside slowed clips highlighting the moment Terrence was forced against the table, despite visibly complying. Inside the Fort Collins Police Department, supervisors became aware of the videos before Seaver even finished his shift. He was called upstairs shortly after lunch. Commander Victor Donnelly had already reviewed both the incident report and preliminary footage when Seaver entered the office. "Close the door," Donnelly said. Seaver sat, arms folded. "This about the library arrest?" Donnelly rotated a monitor toward him. Security footage played silently, wide-angle video from inside the library showing the full interaction uninterrupted. No raised voice from Terrence, no aggressive movement, no disruption. Only escalation initiated by police. Donnelly paused the video at the moment Terrence identified himself. "You wrote that he resisted removal," Donnelly said calmly. "He was argumentative, refused orders." Donnelly rewound slightly. The screen showed Terrence standing slowly, hands visible. "Explain where the resistance occurs." Seaver didn't answer immediately. Across the department, Internal Affairs had already begun collecting public recordings. The language used during the arrest, particularly Seaver's comments, triggered mandatory review under department bias policy. Officer Nolan Worth was interviewed separately. His body camera footage complicated matters further. Audio captured Janice Rowell explaining library policy moments before Seaver physically restrained Terrence, contradicting the claim that staff requested removal. Meanwhile, outside the department, consequences moved faster. Terrence's law firm placed him on temporary leave pending clarification. News outlets contacted the department requesting statements. Comment sections filled with witnesses describing what they saw. And attention shifted toward another figure appearing repeatedly in the videos, Lynette Dempster. Online users quickly identified her as the woman who initiated the confrontation and personally summoned Seaver to the scene. By evening, longer footage surfaced showing her outside the building making the phone call, time-stamped minutes before police arrival. The narrative began changing. This no longer looked like officers responding to a disturbance. It looked coordinated. Late that night, Commander Donnelly authorized a formal internal affairs investigation. Seaver and Worth were placed on administrative leave pending review. For the first time since the arrest, the official story written in the police report began collapsing, and prosecutors reviewing the case against Terrence Carter quietly requested all available evidence, including footage the arresting officers never mentioned. 3 days after the arrest of Terrence Carter, the case prosecutors believed was routine quietly fell apart. Every piece of evidence reviewed told the same story, and none of it supported the officer's report. Library surveillance footage provided uninterrupted timelines. Civilian recordings filled in audio gaps. Body camera video from Officer Nolan Worth confirmed something investigators immediately flagged. Library staff never requested Terrence's removal, and no disturbance existed before police intervention. The arrest narrative written by Officer Brandon Seaver no longer matched reality. Commander Victor Donnelly finalized internal affairs findings within weeks. The conclusion was direct. Seaver initiated enforcement action without lawful justification, used biased language during contact, escalated physical force unnecessarily, and submitted a report containing statements contradicted by recorded evidence. Worth was cited for failure to intervene and for supporting inaccurate reporting. Both officers were terminated. But the investigation didn't stop there. Digital forensics recovered call logs confirming that Lynette Dempster contacted Seaver directly moments after leaving the library, bypassing emergency dispatch entirely. Messages exchanged afterward showed familiarity inconsistent with a professional response. Investigators determined the officer arrived already influenced by her complaint, treating Terrence as the problem before any assessment took place. The district attorney dismissed all charges against Terrence Carter. Within days, Carter filed a federal civil rights lawsuit citing unlawful detention, racial discrimination, and abuse of authority. Depositions forced both former officers under oath, where video evidence played repeatedly beside their written statements. The contradictions were unavoidable. Seaver was later charged with official misconduct, civil rights violations, and falsification of records tied to the arrest. Following trial proceedings, he received a lengthy prison sentence that effectively ended his law enforcement career permanently. Worth avoided prison but lost certification, making future policing employment impossible. Public attention then shifted fully toward Lynette Dempster. Witness testimony and released footage showed her initiating the confrontation, using police authority to enforce personal entitlement, and providing statements investigators determined were knowingly false. Civil liability followed. Her employer terminated her position after national exposure connected her actions to the incident. Lawsuits and public scrutiny reshaped her reputation almost overnight. The same attention she sought inside the library now turning against her. For Terrence Carter, professional damage took longer to repair. Months passed before his practice stabilized, but the case ultimately strengthened his standing within civil rights litigation, turning personal injustice into documented precedent. Because in situations like this, authority isn't judged by power, it's judged by accountability once the cameras start rolling. If you want more stories exposing abuse of power, wrongful arrests, and the moments accountability finally catches up, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications.